of 12.9 degrees with the use of high-intensity TENS, compared to only a 0.37 degree increase with the use of low-intensity TENS and a 1.5 degree decrease in the control group. With the use of intramuscular NMES, Resenbrink found a mean increase in passive external rotation range of motion of 28.7 degrees from baseline to 6 months. All studies reported data for pain. Chantrain found that at 6-month follow-up, 77.2% of subjects receiving surface NMES had no pain compared to 46% in the control group. Leandri found that at 1 month, 90% of subjects receiving high-intensity TENS reported subjective improvement compared to only 10% receiving low-intensity and 5% in the control group. Resenbrink reported that with the use of intramuscular NMES, there was a significant decrease in pain at the end of treatment that was maintained at 6-month follow-up with an overall decrease of 5.89 points with use of the NPRS. And finally, Yu reported that at 6 months, 34% of subjects had no pain with the use of intramuscular NMES versus only 10% in the controls. So in summary, all of the studies found significant decreases in pain with the use of electrical stimulation, except for the low-intensity TENS group in Leandri's study. For the studies reporting data for range of motion, all but the low-intensity TENS group had significant increases with the use of electrical stimulation. And both studies reporting data for subluxation showed significant decreases in the degree of subluxation with the use of electrical stimulation. Additionally, there was significant variability between the studies in terms of sample size, treatment protocols, and control groups. Now for the results of my statistical analysis. For subluxation, I was unable to pull the data. However, I did calculate individual statistics for both studies. In Chantrain, I found the odds ratio to be 4.26, meaning that the odds of a person improving is 4 to 1 in favor of the treatment group. The number needed to treat was found to be 3, meaning that 3 subjects need to receive treatment for 1 to improve. And the experimental group event rate was found to be 0.74, meaning that 74% of subjects improved in the treatment group, compared to the control group event rate of 0.40, meaning that only 40% of subjects improved in the control group. Individual effect sizes for each follow-up time were calculated for the Resenbrink study. For the purposes of shoulder subluxation, a negative effect size is desirable, in that it shows a decrease in the severity of shoulder subluxation. As you can see on the forest plot, all the effect sizes are negative, and the 95% confidence interval does not cross 0, meaning that it is significant. Single group effect sizes were calculated to assess the change in range of motion from baseline to end of treatment and baseline to 1 to 3 month follow-up. For the purposes of range of motion, a positive effect size is desirable, and again, for it to be significant, we do not want the 95% confidence intervals to cross 0. As you can see at the end of treatment, we have a positive effect size, and the confidence interval does not cross 0, meaning that it is significant. However, at the 1 to 3 month follow-up, although we have a positive and large effect size, the confidence interval does slightly cross 0, meaning that we cannot say it is significant. Single group effect sizes were calculated to assess the change in pain from baseline to 3 and 6 month follow-ups. For the purposes of pain, a negative effect size is desirable, and again, we do not want that 95% confidence interval to cross 0. As you can see, at both 3 and 6 months, we have large negative effect sizes, and their 95% confidence intervals do not cross 0, meaning that electrical stimulation is effective at reducing pain in patients with HSP. Odds ratio was also calculated for 3 of the 4 studies to assess change in pain from baseline to 1 to 3 and 6 month follow-ups. For the purposes of odds ratio, a positive odds ratio is desirable, and for it to be significant, the confidence interval cannot cross 1. As you can see, both of the grand odds ratios are positive and do not cross 1, meaning that again, electrical stimulation is significant at reducing pain in patients with HSP. To answer the question whether one type of electrical stimulation is more effective than another, I performed a paired z-test to compare the difference in the log odds ratios for each type. However, since the confidence intervals for each cross 0, there is statistically no difference between the types of electrical stimulation at reducing pain in subjects with HSP. However, since the odds ratio for intramuscular is that much higher for surface, it may be concluded that intramuscular is more effective. In summary, electrical stimulation has a significant effect on pain in patients with HSP. Therefore, I am able to reject my null hypothesis. However, there was no difference found between the three types of electrical stimulation, and I am unable to reject my secondary null hypothesis. This was different than what I expected to find. However, it may be explained by the fact that there was a small number of studies included in the Z analysis and that only one type of electrical stimulation was included. Harm and risk was only addressed by articles using intramuscular NMES in terms of risk for infection. Rosenberg reported that there was no reports of infection, and although you reported 6.3% of subjects had granuloma formation and 3.9% of electrodes broke upon removal, at 18-month follow-up, no reports of infection were noted. However, in searching additional literature, I found an article published in 2001 by Yu et al. who compared stimulation-induced pain with the use of intramuscular versus surface NMES. And the study reported that median visual analog scale scores for intramuscular NMES were significantly less when compared to surface. And when asked, 9 out of 10 subjects preferred intramuscular NMES over surface, indicating that intramuscular NMES may be more clinically tolerable. No studies directly address cost. However, things to consider are the cost of the unit and the need for a trained person to administer or implant the electrodes. A study published by Van Til et al. Compared intramuscular NMES to slings and anti-inflammatory injections. And although a 6-week course of intramuscular NMES was almost 10 times more expensive than the other treatments, its effectiveness was 73% compared to only 28 to 42% with the use of slings or anti-inflammatory injections. Converting the effect size for pain back to clinical units revealed a pre to post-test to post-treatment change of 5.7 points with the use of the numeric pain rating scale. And this, which with the minimal clinically important difference being 2 points, this indicates that electrical stimulation has a clinically significant effect on reducing pain in patients with HSP. Although not found to be statistically significant at 1 to 3 month follow-up, when converted back to clinical units, I found there to be an average increase in range of motion of 25.3 degrees, which exceeds the MCID for range of motion, meaning that electrical stimulation has a clinically significant effect on increasing external rotation range of motion in patients with HSP. Although there is no MCID published for shoulder subluxation, when looking back at what the individual studies found, it can be said that surface NMES may be clinically effective at reducing the degree of shoulder subluxation. In terms of clinical implications, there are various advantages and disadvantages to using either surface or intramuscular NMES. The advantages for surface NMES are that there is less risk for harm or adverse effects, and it requires no implantation. However, the disadvantages are there may be decreased tolerance due to the pain caused by stimulation, there's poor muscle selectivity and force, and it does require a skilled person to administer. The advantages for intramuscular NMES are that there are less pain upon stimulation, there's improved muscle selectivity, and apart from the initial implantation, subjects are able to self-administer. However, the disadvantages are that it's not widely utilized in the clinic, there is a high cost, and a risk for infection. Limitations of individual studies are that they had small sample sizes with significant variability, and heterogeneity existed in terms of follow-up time, outcome measures, and the fact that not all studies reported data for baseline pain. Limitations of my review is that I only included studies in English, there was a small number of studies included, and the subgroups I used resulted in smaller pools of data for analysis. Also, there was significant statistical heterogeneity, and I had to use the random effects model. In the future, research should include randomized controlled trials with larger sample sizes and longer follow-up times that compare the different types of electrical stimulation. Appropriate outcome measures for HSP should also be identified and standardized. And more research needs to be done looking at the exact mechanism for the development of HSP. In conclusion, electrical stimulation is effective in treating HSP, and intramuscular NMES may be the most effective type. Additionally, physical therapists should strongly consider the use of electrical stimulation as a treatment for HSP. These are my references, and I'd like to thank the following.